Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had someone actually ask me a couple different times in a video that I did a couple days ago. They wanted to know, how can you actually tell when you're 1 to 2 reps away from muscle failure? There's actually a very good reason to know this and to try to figure this out. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And the reason this might sound like a funny question to some people who are kind of new to certain aspects of exercise science and training, they might be like, well, why would you want to know if you're 1 to 2 reps away from failure? Well, because simply put, the top experts in the world all agree the reason that it's suggested that you train to failure is not because you get more benefits to train to failure. It's because some people can't tell when they've reached the threshold where they've stimulated maximum stimulation off of a single set. Meaning that actually happens just short of muscle failure. It's just that by going to muscle failure, for people who don't have the body awareness to know when they are 1 to 2 reps away from failure, that by going to failure, you actually ensure that you reach that threshold. But there are negatives to going to failure also, and that's why this becomes important to think about this. And not everyone is ever going to have the ability to do this, and that's part of the problem, unfortunately, because to know when you're close does require a certain amount of body awareness, and it does require a certain amount of setting your ego to the side and learning to be objective, being objective with your training. And there are methods you can use to do that. And again, the reason we would even care is because since we know actually hitting muscle failure itself doesn't benefit you, and in some cases it can impede recovery. It can make you take longer to recover. And if you take longer to recover, you can't train as frequently. Does that matter if you're not doing particularly high frequency training? Probably not. But if you're also not doing fairly high frequency training, you're also not maximizing your gains. So it's about finding that balance there with your training, finding that proper balance between stimulating muscle growth, stimulating as much muscle growth as you think you might need, or at least a desirable amount within a session, versus recovering and being able to train again soon enough to make sure that you're stimulating the most you can every week and every month. And there is a balance to be made there. And you know what? It's difficult to pin that down. It requires a bit of finesse. It requires you to be honest with yourself about your training, to be honest with yourself about how things are going. So there are benefits to getting to that threshold and stopping. Because again, the actual rep that you fail doesn't stimulate new growth. You didn't successfully lift a weight. You didn't fire the muscle fibers that you wanted. They gave out before they actually really got any more stimulation. So what do we mean by muscle failure? First, we've got to really define the term, because a lot of people have these ideas, and you'll see crazy people write articles, well, it's not muscle failure, until you can't even cheat the weight up anymore, and all this crazy stuff. No, muscle failure means, and I'll do it with a simple exercise, like a bicep curl. Muscle failure means that you take whatever weight you can, and you can no longer do this with it. Meaning, with using good form, the same form that you started the first rep with, if you're not cheating on the first rep, you don't cheat on the last one. Meaning, if you're just curling like this, say you're using a 30-pound dumbbell, the rep where you try to go up, and it stops here and comes down, that's muscle failure. That's muscle failure. When you can no longer use good form and complete the repetition, you failed because the muscles failed. They gave out. And there's different reasons they give out. Sometimes neurological, depending on the rep range. Sometimes it's chemical inside the muscle. Higher reps, it tends to be chemical-induced failure. The muscles just don't have the fuel reserves to contract the upper threshold fibers anymore. They stop. And those are the ones that grow the most. They just can't contract anymore. You can't lift the weight. All right. Well, part of the answer should be obvious, and this requires people to assess their technique and form. A lot of that you can't do with a mirror. It's actually, watching yourself in the mirror can really mess you up on a lot of exercises. So that's not a valuable tool. A lot of it has to do with body awareness. And what I would recommend to people, something that's a valuable tool for you to use when you're lifting or you're doing any physical activity. It doesn't have to be weightlifting. It could be any activity that you do, whether it's playing a guitar, playing pool, swinging a tennis racket, martial arts, anything. Learning to be in tune with where your body is and the movements that your body is doing, the different parts of your body are doing, is a valuable tool for any physical endeavor. And anyone who's ever done anything physical knows that. Hell, even playing a video game, the angle of which you put your hands could affect how fast you can click buttons. Body awareness. Be aware of what your body is doing when you're performing an exercise. And here's the thing. When you start to get really close to muscle failure, there's a natural tendency to cheat. Natural tendency to cheat. And what do I mean by cheat? All right, perfect examples. You're curling, right? You lean forward and you lean back. Why did you have to do that? Why did your body tell you to do that? Because you were trying to lift a weight that you couldn't lift. Isolating muscles is not natural for humans. It's a very unnatural thing for us. We don't want to do it. We're goal-driven with our bodies, so our kinetics of we're trying to perform an action or move an object or throw something or grab something or pull something. That has been the entirety of our existence as humans, as Homo sapien. We're trying to use as many muscles as possible to perform an action. Isolating a muscle or even using perfect technique requires focus. Even on a bench press, it uses multiple muscles. It requires focus because you are trying to train a certain movement, not necessarily move as much weight as possible with the least effort possible. Okay, so what happens when you become fatigued in your body and your nervous system, particularly your peripheral nervous system, starts to sense that you can no longer lift that weight? It's your natural inclination to cheat. The first rep that you have to cheat on is probably 1 rep away from failure. Because your body knows you might not have completed that rep without cheating. So some of it's not about feeling the muscle. Some of it's about feeling your body shift and being aware of what your body is doing. Okay, bench press. Perfect example. When you go to bench press, a bench press should be like this. It should only take you a second to lock that weight. Guys hit world records on the bench press with 600, 700 pounds where they just lock it out. That should tell you something about the exercise. That's 100% of their max. That's sometimes the most that person's ever bench pressed in their life, not just in competition. Yet it's fast most of the time. If you are grinding a bench press, odds are you are cheating the weight up. What I mean, when you go to bench press up and it starts to stick, if you're paying attention to your body, it sticks because it's too heavy for you to lift using proper technique. All right? You are not strong enough to lift that weight or it wouldn't stick at all. What do? If our spotter doesn't grab the bar, well, the first time a spotter touches a bar, you know you done screwed up. You've lost your ability to tell what's going on. You have to stop spotters from touching stuff. But when you go to bench, what happens when it sticks right here? We do this. See how I just shifted? You shift under the weight. And you shift in a direction that takes your weakest side and pushes the weight up more. Like in this case, I'm exaggerating this because it's oftentimes a very subtle shift. We shift so that our weaker side gets under the bar better. We get it under the weight so that it can use leverage to push the arm up, and it then shifts the load over so that the stronger side is it having to try to take over where the weak side couldn't lift. That's muscle failure. Because had you not cheated and tried to use the good technique, the weight would have stopped and come back down and hit you in the chest. So if you had to shift and cheat, you've reached muscle failure. Or because you didn't lift the weight normally, you actually engaged a few less muscle fibers than you should have to lift that weight because you cheated and used other things, or your ass came off the bench, which again can jolt the weight and shift leverages. Because you did a different movement to cheat the weight up, you're pretty much there. You're at that threshold. And here's what I would recommend to guys. If they want to know how to tell when you're a rep away, start paying attention to that. Because the rep before you cheat will feel slightly different to you. If you're aware of your body, that weight feels heavier on the rep before you cheat. You'll notice it. If you start paying attention to what's going on with your body, the feeling of the weight, and you're focused when you're lifting, you will notice a subtle difference in the way the muscles feel and how heavy the weight feels. Even the grip in your hands will feel heavier on the rep before you cheat. That is how you know you're there. That feeling you get in the muscles tells you that you got within one rep, you're 1 to 2 reps of muscle failure. When you learn over the years of training, sometimes it takes years to learn this. Some people learn it very quickly because some people are just more body intuitive than others. All right. In fact, that's been studied on IQ tests. They figured out that body intuitiveness is actually one aspect of your intelligence. People have different types of intelligences that they excel at. That's one of them. So some people are just more body intuitive than others, and that's okay. Those people tend to become better athletes and things. So some people can learn that very, very fast. It might take another person a year or two to learn that, but that's okay because you can learn it. You have to learn to pay attention. You've got to learn to set your ego to the side and be objective with your training. And it's not, I think I should be able to lift this weight. It's what's my body telling me that's going on? What's the bar speed telling me that's going on? How heavy does this weight really feel to me? All right, and you've got to be honest with yourself, and that requires a degree of letting go of your ego in order to do that, to be honest with yourself about what's going on. And that's something that it comes easier to some people than others, and that's why, because of those two things, some people don't have a degree of body awareness. Some people can't let go of their ego enough to be objective with themselves. So some people will never be able to learn this because of that. And those people are just going to have to train to failure to ensure they get the growth stimulation they want. But for other people, it can be learned, and it is that feeling you get right before you have to cheat that weight up. And sometimes you'll learn to feel it on that weight you cheated up, and then learn to back step from there and find that rep before it. And that's how you would go about doing that. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.